I'm excited to be joined on this episode of Courageous Conversations Live by Omar L. Harris. Omar, thanks for being my guest today.
Thanks again for having me, Pierre. It's great to talk to you again.
Yeah, now I know it's been a while since we have chatted on the Leading While Green podcast, man. Catch everyone up, or the people who are familiar with you from the podcast and those who don't know you. 2020 has been a really unique year for you and your leadership and your journey. Give us some of the highlights, or the 35,000 foot view of your journey this year.
I will do. So the last time we spoke, we were talking about the book that I published last year, Leaderboard: The DNA of High Performance Teams. At that time, I was living in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I was working as general manager of Allergan PLC, which is a major pharmaceutical company. And since that time, Allergan PLC is now AbbVie. AbbVie is a corporation from a pharma company based out of Chicago, which purchased Allergan last June. Actually, my birthday last June, they purchased the company. I woke up on my birthday and I found out that my company had been bought by another company. It's the second time it's happened to me on my birthday, actually. That happened about 10 years ago as well. And also during this same time period, my mother fell sick around this time last year with metastatic bile duct cancer. And I started working on a new book called The Servant Leaders Manifesto, which we're going to chat a little bit about today.
Yeah.
And all that led to me kind of thinking about my purpose and what I was doing with my life. And I'd been living outside the U.S. for 8 years, coming into 2020, Turkey, Indonesia, Brazil. And I realized with my mother's situation, it was time for me to come back home. So in March, April, I made the transition back from Brazil to the U.S. I'm living in Charlotte, North Carolina now. And in April, I published the Servant Leaders Manifesto, hot on the heels of Leaderboard in 2019. I wrote the book in about 4 months, and
wow,
very, very proud of it. I think that going through my mom's situation and reevaluating my kind of career in my life kind of crystallized some thoughts for me, and I wanted to put it all down in kind of a manifesto for my life and what I want to be about. And I know there's like-minded people like myself who feel the same way. So, and the response to the book has been phenomenal. Unfortunately, my mother passed away on April 17th, but her legacy lives on through me and through our family. And so we're carrying on. 2020 has been a weird year, man. You know, COVID I moved back to the U.S., lockdown, basically, and readjusting back to the U.S. during a lockdown during this kind of weird political environment, social injustice.
Yeah.
It was a weird move back to the U.S. But I think that it was very important as well, because I got some other ideas for the next project that I'm actually putting out next March, and we keep moving on, man. So it's been a challenging time, I know, for everybody, myself included. But out of challenge comes inspiration, comes the next, comes clarity as well sometimes. And for me, it was definitely gave me some clarity about what I want to be doing, and always good to be talking to you and seeing you doing your thing as well, man.
Man, speaking of talking, what's the ratio? Do you what's the higher number? The number of countries you've lived in, or the number of languages that you speak? Like, give us
number of countries for sure. I mean, actually, no. So I've lived in 4 countries that speak 5 languages. I guess languages is bigger than number of countries that I've lived in, but I visited 45 countries in my life. Yeah.
So, okay, 4 or 5 languages. I'm sure it's like you may consider yourself fluent in a number of languages, and then can understand the pieces of others.
Fluent in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, and I can get around enough. I call myself know enough to be dangerous in Turkish and Indonesian. So that kind of, if you can talk to a cab driver in Turkey, you might as well be fluent. And if you can understand the slang and what's happening with the young people in Indonesia, you might as well be fluent too. So I think that's kind of a measure of fluency to a certain degree.
Man, when we chatted on the Leading While Green podcast, you told the story of learning, man, an interesting story about learning a particular language and the immersion aspect and how that impacted your job. Man, can you tell that story again?
Yeah. So when I moved to Sao Paulo, Brazil, this is my 3rd time living in Brazil in my career. It's very interesting. I was an intern in Sao Paulo with Pfizer, who's in the news right now because of the COVID vaccine. This is 20 years ago in 2000. I lived in Sao Paulo and I was 23 years old. And I was I was told when I moved down to Sao Paulo that I didn't need to learn the language before I got there to do my job. I ran into my new boss, and he had a different idea. Really told me the first time I met him that he couldn't use me if I didn't learn the language faster. So basically come back to him in 2 months when I could speak the language. And so I picked up an English to Portuguese dictionary, started defining 25 words a day. And in 3 months, I was speaking the language and was able to write and read and communicate. And now I attribute this to a 23-year-old brain, not it's become a lot more difficult when I moved to certain countries. That the older that I've gotten, it's gotten a lot more difficult to learn languages. And the languages have gotten more complex as well. Not that Portuguese isn't complex, but Turkish is hard, man. Turkish is, they have this thing about suffixes. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 different suffixes to different words that changes the meaning. It's just very, very challenging. And Indonesian, for a very simple language, because it was a trading language created by Muslim traders who were going to those islands to try to trade with them. So they created a language that everybody could kind of speak because there's so many different dialects and different tribes. It's a very simple language, but the way it's used is very complicated. So you can speak Bahasa Indonesia and not actually communicate. Which is very strange. Like you can have a basic understanding, like about 1,000 words, and not really be able to have a conversation with anybody, which is really frustrating.
So, man, this is great because this sets us up for the next stage in our conversation. You talk about, learning different languages, the immersion process. Your boss who said, I can't really use you until you come back and you can write and speak the language. How important is it, especially for leaders who are transitioning to a new organization and they're bringing whatever history, whatever expertise, whatever regard from their past positions, but how important for them is to get immersed in the language and culture of this new place that they're called to lead and serve?
Yeah, your experience is only as good as your immersion. So you're not going to be able to apply that experience until you really have gone through that immersion process. When I was working as doing consulting, and I had a tech startup in the early 2010s, and then I moved back into pharmaceuticals after 2.5 years, and a large pharma company at that, and in a different culture in Turkey. And I really couldn't make an impact right away until I had adapted to all the different cultural nuances of living in a different country, also working for a different company, understanding the new culture, and also going back to the corporate structure of making decisions and getting things done, the bureaucracy of a corporation. And you need to, I forget exactly who said the quote, but maybe it was Einstein that said that, first you need to, in order for you to win, you have to learn the rules, and then you do them, play the game better than anybody else. So you have to learn the rules.
I love that. Yeah.
You have to really, you can't innovate until you know the rules and the rules of the game you're playing. And so I think it's very important that you do immerse yourself. I always tell my colleagues that in the first 90 days, it's really about getting all the answers you need to be successful in those first 90 days. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And that's where you really add your value, is when you question. So you come in the door with a different perspective. You can ask a lot of questions in that 90-day period to get your answers, but also to challenge certain status quo things that are going on in the organization. So companies need that questioning to improve. People from the outside coming in and asking, why are we doing this way? That really is an important question. And if more leaders who are inside the company listen to people coming from the outside asking, why are we doing it this way? That is how you can really begin to innovate as well within the existing corporate structure. So I think that I totally agree with you on immersion, but also don't forget that the value you add is questioning, not knowing anything. It's more about questioning the processes and why things are being done the way they're being done.
So why this new book, the Servant Leaders Manifesto? I mean, you're really hot off the trail of leaderboard, getting some traction under there. There are different schools of thought as it relates to authorship and thought leadership. Why write the Servant Leaders Manifesto?
Well, because when I was promoting leaderboard, I detected that I kind of had leaderboard is kind of an advanced book in terms of team leadership principles. I realized that I skipped a step, which was you have to have certain beliefs and philosophies in order for you to fully adopt the principle of the leaderboard. One of them has to be that you have to care about people.
Yeah.
If you don't care about leading, and if you're not concerned about becoming a better leader, then you're not really you might read leaderboard and think it's a cool book, but you're not going to change yourself. And so I realized I need to take a step back and write about servant leadership, which is really more the building block principle for someone who can then go on to lead a high-performing team. You can't just start off with just jumping into high-performance teams and do all the things I recommend in that book if you don't really give a crap about people.
Yeah.
And serving the organization to which you're working for. So leaderboard is really it should have been the second book, actually. It just didn't come out that way. And Servant Leaders Manifesto is kind of like a correction of the sequence. So I would recommend people now actually to correct it and read if you haven't read Leaderboard yet, then great. Read the Servant Leaders Manifesto first, and then go read Leaderboard next, and you'll get that sequence correct, that sequence right. But if you read Leaderboard now, go back and read the Servant Leaders Manifesto, because it will definitely build on what we talked about in that book.
What are your thoughts on the shift in really leadership styles and philosophies over the years? It used to be, great man, great woman leadership, where the leader was unflappable and very much stoic and strong arm, and especially in a crisis situation, kind of just pushing us through. So now when you look at the workplace, a lot of people are really pushing back on that philosophy or that ideology of leadership. How has it shifted, and what role does servant leadership play in the shift that you're saying in leadership culture?
Well, what's been happening underneath, over time has been the heterogeneity of the workforce, the diversification of the workforce. So I talk about the beginning chapters of Leaderboard, and certainly the Servant Leaders Manifesto, that the reason why servant leadership's time is now is because there's been a dramatic demographic shift of the workforce, but leadership has stayed kind of in that mode of the command and control, the strong person leader, and that needs to evolve now, because for the first time in history, if you're a leader or a manager in a corporation, you're leading the most diverse workforce in history in terms of gender, nationality, race, sexual orientation, and generational orientation. Boomers and Zoomers working together side by side. So the toolkit you were given, like being the boss, is not going to work anymore. No one wants to be boss, because the way we get things done today is collaboration and technology, not what I call individual exceptionalism. So the mode of the same thing like in sports. You look at the NBA, right? It used to be that hero ball, like Michael Jordan take over the game in the fourth quarter, was the way you won championships. You could have a great team, but you needed that one player who was going to take over the game in the fourth quarter. Hero ball, unfortunately, passed away with Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was the last hero ball guy. Now you win via the team plus the coach, plus the staff. It's the organization, that collaboration, everyone playing their role. That's what wins championships today. And so it's the same principle within the workforce. And for you as a coach or as a manager, to get the most out of your people, because the group is so diverse, you have to individualize leadership. And that is servant leadership, one of the main principles of servant leadership, which is basically meeting every single person where they are, understanding each individual's motivators, demotivators, needs, loves, and hates, and then combining that synergistically with the whole to drive yourself towards your overarching objective. But it starts with, okay, I need to figure out what makes each one of these people tick, because they're not like me anymore. Like used to be in the past, if I was a manager 80 years ago, I was a white man managing other white dudes. We all pretty much have the same background. We know each other. We have similar stories. So I don't really need to investigate your background that much. But over time, those white guys that I was managing became Black women, became white women, became Indians, became younger or older, became, so that changed. And I didn't change. I'm the same person. So this is what's happening. I just moved up in the organization, but underneath me, everything has changed. Everything is fundamentally shifted. So we have to shift. And that's what the Servant Leaders Manifesto is about, which is basically, it's triggering the fact that this wave of change is coming. If you are still trying to become a boss today, you are going to get swept away, because the expectations are dramatically shifting. There was a business forum roundtable of the top CEOs in America in 2019, and they actually changed the definition of a corporation away from shareholder capitalism, which is just simply the company exists to serve its shareholders, to stakeholder capitalism with 5 new goals of the corporation, which is to improve the lives of customers, employees, the community, the environment, and shareholders. So bosses can't do those 5 things. You know,
Yeah.
servant leaders can, but bosses cannot reach those 5 goals, which is why if that's the bar now, then leadership has to dramatically change itself to get there.
Well, the pushback. What about the people that say, so okay, if as a leader, I am checking on different personalities and leadership styles and tendencies and kind of flow of my team, and this is a high priority for me. When do I have time to do the work? Like what that? Because I've heard that in certain conversations. So Omar, when am I going to do work if I'm just checking up on people?
Well, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the work is, of what your job as a leader is. So your job is to succeed through people. And if you want to succeed through people, you have to know them. You have to understand what makes them tick. It makes your job easier to know what someone's strengths are versus to say, okay, you have this title, do this job. And I'm not interested in anything but the output of your job. I'm not going to help you do your job better. It's kind of counterintuitive. The other thing I talk about in the book is this whole concept of A players and vitality curves that Jack Welch talked about in Straight from the Gut back in the early 2000s. That's dead. The A player theory doesn't work anymore. You need to build A teams. The only way to build A teams is to understand each individual's proclivities better and get the most out of each individual. It's a slower way at the beginning, but much faster once you get to the coalesce that information. So it's kind of going slow to go fast as a principle. The work is still going to be there. The outputs are still going to be there, but they can be achieved much faster and much more seamlessly when the group is working better together in harmony. And that's the real job of a leader, is to understand what's preventing your team from being successful. Usually it's not just the clarity of your instructions. Usually it's some other thing, some other barrier that's preventing them from being successful that you have to investigate and eradicate. And that's what your job is continuously understanding the barriers to the work, and then leveraging your influence and your authority and your information, your expertise and capability to help remove those barriers so your people are maximally effective.
You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, you kind of evaluating with all the things that were going on with the transition in business projects you were working on, the challenges your mother was facing. You introduced a word into our conversation. You said you were evaluating really the purpose for your life. How do we as leaders wrestle with that, because we have our employees, our staff, our volunteers with their individual purpose. And then we have the overall purpose of the organization in which we're all as a collective called to serve. How do we support, both areas, both an individual's purpose and then the greater collective that we're all trying to embrace?
So for me, that's another key area that servant leaders bring to organizations. They lead with purpose. So they help establish purpose where it is not existing, or they help reconnect in a realigned purpose for people. So for example, when I was in Indonesia, it was my first time leading an organization of over 800 people. And I very quickly understood that the global mission and vision of that pharmaceutical company was not connecting with every area of my enterprise. It connected from a Salesforce perspective and from a commercial perspective, but it didn't connect with the support functions, HR, regulatory, legal, IT, all the other people who have to do the work as well. And so I had to work with my leadership team to create a purpose for us, because there's the overarching purpose of the organization, which is fine. That does not change. But what energizes us here in Indonesia? What gets us up every day to come to work as a subset of that particular purpose? And that's what we had to work on as a team. And that allowed us to create an overarching purpose statement that connected the entire organization together. That was bigger than numbers. It wasn't about sales. It was about creating the best place to work, highest customer retention, highest reputation in the government, with the government and other stakeholders, and also the highest digital transformation in the organization. That was something that everybody could connect with. And that's the kind of thing that you have to create, that you have to make sure that your people are aligned and more importantly, energized by the work that they're doing. If they're not energized and engaged, then you're not going to get the productivity that you require to drive yourself to the outcomes that you are looking for.
Why is it so important for more people, for more leaders to embrace the servant leader ideology, especially with, as we're recording this, all the things that have happened in 2020 that you referenced early in our conversation, and then even the uncertainty leading into 2021, the leadership transitions in the United States, at least the medical distress. Why is it so important for so many people to commit to being servant leaders?
Well, right now, so for example, one of the big things I'm thinking about right now is the vaccine rollout for when it comes through with either Moderna or Pfizer's vaccine or both of them, and the important role of the corporation now in getting people to vaccinate, because really, we exist on a political spectrum, far right to far left, but we all work for corporations. The corporations are apolitical. Corporations are supposed to be mostly non-political organizations. And a corporation can mandate you to take a vaccine for your job's sake, whereas a government cannot. The government can't make you take a vaccine, but a company can. But the people who need to make the argument are the servant leaders within the corporations to say, listen, what is this ultimately about? Once again, reconnecting to the organization's purpose. We have people going out for 14-day quarantine every week or so. How are we as an organization going to succeed? That's going to result in more job losses, more layoffs, less productivity, and less performance, which is going to make it unstable for everybody. The one thing we can all agree on is that we all need stability. I don't care if you're far right or far left. We all want stability in our work. If we all want stability in our work, then taking the vaccine is a no-brainer, because that's going to provide some degree of stability, knowing that we can work together and not get sick. And it's no different than flu or any other vaccines that we also take that is pushed by our corporations. For those of us who work in large companies who have, preventative health care programs, it's the same principle. So I think that servant leaders will have an important role in connecting the purpose of the organization to the health of the employee and positioning this as, this is what's good. We're doing this for you. This is good for your home life. It's good for our work life. If we want to get things back to normal again, we're all going to have to kind of commit to this. If we polarize and politicize this issue like we did with masks, then we're going to have a problem. And we see what happens when you don't have leadership. When we lack leadership in a crisis, people they scatter. You can't align anybody. And so the biggest job of the new administration is going to be around keeping it tight and keeping everything aligned and keeping things, the messaging very, very clear, keeping the science very, very clear. But leadership is going to have to step up within corporations and organizations to make the case for why everyone, regardless of your political spectrum, should be taking these vaccines so that we can get back to normal.
This is a time in the year where, people have breaks and vacations. They have time to reflect. A lot of people catch up on their reading, or this is a time where, people are trying to think about what's a good gift that I could give to the leaders that I work with and that I serve. Why should people consider making the Servant Leaders Manifesto part of their reflection downtime, or even part of their gift giving this season?
Well, I think it's a very good question, Pierre, but I think that if especially this year, when we saw what a lack of leadership does, right? When we've very clearly seen when you don't lead, what can happen. Or when you lead with the boss mentality, and because the boss mentality really is about the ego, serving myself. So when you serve yourself and don't serve the others and the people that you're responsible for, you can kind of see now a very clear example of what happens when you lead with that direction. So if you are curious about a different way, a different approach to leadership, then you should definitely include the Servant Leaders Manifesto in your stocking stuffer this year. And I write in the book, though, Pierre, very importantly, I did not write this book for C-suite. I did not write this book for CEOs and VPs and people like that. For me, they're kind of too far gone. I wrote this book for new managers, frontliners, frontline managers or people who want to become managers very soon. So if you're looking for promotion in 2021, read this book. If you're already a new manager and you've had a year under your belt, read this book. Or if you're looking to level up your leadership skills, read this book. But I don't think, if you have a VP, you're not going to change their behavior by giving them this book because they're too entrenched in the old way. It's more about the new wave. I'm trying to build the next wave with this particular book. I'm not as concerned about where the current status quo leaders are because I know that they're going to age out. They're going to move on. That wave is going to happen. So we need to prepare the current generation, the millennials now, the Gen Zers coming in, who are taking over these positions now to be prepared to properly lead for the future.
So Omar, we've heard about two books that you have written. We've heard about leadership in the pharmaceutical industry. Now, some people are intrigued. What's the best way if we want to follow up with you and your work and hear about the other projects that you're working on in your thought leadership? What's the best way to get connected to you?
Just my website, www.omarlharris.com is the best way to reach me, contact me. And also I'm on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn/N Omar L. Harris is the way to get me on LinkedIn as well.
Omar, thanks for hanging out with me for another episode of Courageous Conversations Live. I'm going to encourage everyone to go out and buy their copy of the Servant Leaders Manifesto. Thanks for hanging out today.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Pierre. Take care.